All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Alan Hu Foundation Mental Health Lecture Series. I'm Chi-Ching Hu, co-founder of Alan Hu Foundation and host for your webinar. Today, Diana Winston will give an introduction to mindfulness. First off, I want to thank Mental Health Association for Chinese Communities for providing simultaneous Chinese interpretation, and thank you, Ida Xiao, for Chinese interpretation. Alan Hu Foundation's mission is to promote mental health, raise awareness, and remove stigma surrounding psychiatric disorders, and support fundamental research for cures. Please consider making a gift to Alan Hu Foundation by using the donation link in the chat box. Thank you for your support. Today, it is our great honor and privilege to introduce Diana Winston. Diana is Director of Mindfulness Education at UCLA Mindful Awareness Research Center. She's the author of The Little Book of Being and the co-author of Fully Present, The Science, Art, and Practice of Mindfulness. The LA Times called her one of the nation's best-known teachers of mindfulness. She has taught mindfulness in a variety of settings in the United States and Asia. She developed the Mindfulness Awareness Practices curriculum and the training in mindfulness facilitation, which trains mindfulness teachers worldwide. Today, Diana will lead a workshop on mindfulness and how it can be helpful to reduce stress and cultivate well-being for adolescents and their parents. In this workshop, it will include a Q&A session. Please submit your questions using the Zoom Q&A function. Alan Hu Foundation's Mental Health Lecture Series is for educational purpose only and is not intended for medical diagnosis. If you have any persistent symptoms, please seek professional help. With that, I'm going to turn to Diana. Welcome, Diana.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here with all of you. Okay, so we're going to learn about mindfulness, and I'm going to start with some slides.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, great. So I'm going to be introducing mindfulness to you to help reduce stress, increase well-being in challenging times. And I'll be emphasizing adolescent and adult mental health. And you'll see that it's sort of the same issues and the same benefits. And then, of course, different ways of presenting it when working with different populations. So I want to start by defining mindfulness. And I like to define mindfulness as paying attention to our present moment experiences with openness, curiosity, and a willingness to be with that experience. So if you are uncertain what mindfulness is, it's really about that capacity that all of us have to be in the present moment. And I'm going to talk more about it as we go along, so you'll get a better sense of things. But just so that we're all starting on the same page, this is what mindfulness is about. So mindfulness is an ancient tradition. It comes out of the Buddhist world. It's about 2,600 years old. But since it's been taught throughout the world, it's been brought into all sorts of settings, including this is like a corporate setting. It's been taught in medical, mental health, lots of settings. I'll tell you in a minute. I don't know if any of you ever watched Mad Men, but we can even see it in popular culture. But we can see it being brought into the workplace, into education, higher education, creativity, and the arts. It's been brought into first responders. I just the other day taught a day of mindfulness for first responders in like police officers, firefighters, paramedics, EMTs. It's very helpful within the mental health field and within the healthcare field. So there's much, much more. And then it's being taught people of all ages. So it is taught with little kids. And I know that I received some of the questions in advance about teaching mindfulness with very little kids. It is being taught in schools, but I'm going to focus more on adolescents and adults. This is an image that I'm going to leave you with for 1 second. Unfortunately, I'm teaching from home and I have a dog who just is scratching at the door. 1 second. Sorry. Don't be surprised if he wants to come back in a few minutes. In any case, this is an image from a school in Brooklyn, New York, where high school, where the teenagers were so interested in mindfulness that they convinced the administration to open up a meditation room, and they turned a utility closet into a meditation space. And it's a really wonderful space for the students, and it came from their own initiative. So mindfulness is being brought into so many different sectors. Now, if you were to practice mindfulness, whether you're a teen or an adult, mindfulness is helpful for reducing stress and anxiety, and we'll talk a little bit more about how that happens. It can improve attention. There's some good research around that. It can cultivate self-awareness and self-regulation, and it can helping us with our emotions and balance, self-regulation, and it can also improve our relationships. It's a very helpful self-care tool, and it's something that we're living in a time that is very, very challenging, as you all know. The world events, we know that incidents of mental health issues are very, very high, people of all ages. And so mindfulness is not the only solution. It's one of many solutions, but it's something that a lot of people are finding to be tremendously helpful these days. So let's talk a little bit about the research in mindfulness. The research is fairly new, but I mean, they started it back in the 80s. As you can see, there was 1 or 2 studies. So this is the years, this only goes up to 2018. But there was a big leap about 10 years ago. And we went from just a few studies into a number of studies. And now there's probably 7,000 or 8,000 studies looking at the efficacy of mindfulness. Now that sounds great, but if you were to find out how many research studies are there telling you that exercise is helpful for heart disease? You can think for a moment, guess in your mind. The answer is about 60 or 70,000 studies. So mindfulness is still in its early stages. The results are very promising. I'll show you some of the results in a moment, but it's still many more things to do, a lot more to study here. So let's talk about how mindfulness can help us with physical health. Mindfulness is helpful for stress-related conditions. So some of these conditions are, things like high blood pressure can be affected by mindfulness, can be positively affected. Inflammation, I have here inflammation, because inflammation is the body's response to stress. It's a normal, appropriate response, but prolonged inflammation without treatment can lead, and prolonged stress can lead to these whole set of diseases. Mindfulness can be helpful. In fact, the geneticists have seen positive influence of mindfulness on genetic markers for diseases related to inflammation. So what's happening when we're under stress? When we're under stress, the cortisol levels in our body are rising, and then that helps with the increase with the inflammatory response. Our immune response goes down. But when we practice meditation, we find that the reverse happens. Cortisol levels drop, the inflammation lowers, and the immune response is boosted. And so these types of mechanisms have been shown over and over. And I'll give you an example. This was one of the early studies looking at the impact of mindfulness on the mind-body connection. So this is done with people who suffer from psoriasis. Psoriasis is that, as you probably know, the itchy skin condition that a lot of people have related to stress. The treatment is what you see here. There's it's almost like a tanning bed where people get UVB rays on their skin, ultraviolet rays on their skin. So in this particular study, they had people meditate while they were receiving the UVB rays, and other people didn't. And the people who meditated while they were receiving the treatment, their skin cleared up much faster. So it took only about 20 days for their skin to heal instead of 60 days. That's 3 times faster. This is a very promising study that was done, and it's been replicated. But the question is, what it points to is the mind-body connection. What we do with our mind impacts our body. And a lot of these studies are showing that through mindfulness practice is where we practice calming our mind, concentrating, finding ease, finding well-being, that it impacts our physical health. So let's talk about mental health. Mental health. We know that mental health is a serious concern, especially in these years post-pandemic. Maybe it's not even post, but we're still all struggling with mental health issues. Whether you're an adolescent or an adult, a parent of an adolescent with mental health challenges, and there's so many variations on this. Mindfulness is actually an extremely helpful tool. The research is quite robust around how it impacts anxiety and depression. So there's a lot of studies showing that mindfulness is helpful for anxiety and depression. It's so helpful that it's been incorporated into a variety of treatments, clinical treatments like these called mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy. They're all for different things. The first one's more typically used for depression, the second for anxiety, and the third for borderline personality disorder, but it's also being used with eating disorders and other issues. So I bring this up mostly to say that mindfulness is part of these therapies because it's shown to be so useful. So this is an interesting study. Mindfulness across the board seems to show that people are happier when they practice it. This was a study done in 2011 where they had 2,500 people all over the world who were buzzed at random intervals in the day on their smartphone, and they were asked these 3 questions. What are you doing? Is your mind on it? And how is your mood? So they could have been doing absolutely anything at all, and they were asked these questions. So they looked at the data. They had many thousand data points. First of all, the first thing they found out was about half the time we're not in the present moment. About half the time we're lost in the past or lost in the future. I'll tell you what happens in our mind, but basically most of the time, at least half the time, people are not in the present moment. So where are we when we're not in the present moment? And this is, as I said, looking at about 250,000 times they asked this question, what are you doing? So what they discovered is that we want to look here at the scale. The scale is the happiness. This is the unhappy. See the sad faces, unhappy. This is happy. A third of the time when we're not, when we're just, our mind is wandering, we're thinking about unpleasant things. A third of the time neutral things, and a third of the time pleasant things. If we're thinking about pleasant things, so let's say you're, driving and you're thinking about a great meal you had yesterday, you're happy. You're happy. If let's say you're at school and you're thinking, the sky is blue, that's kind of a neutral thought. People don't report being happy. If they're thinking, oh no, I'm stressed out about the test I have to take, what am I going to do? I might fail. As you can imagine, people reported unhappiness. So about 2/3 of the time when people's mind wander into the past or the future, they report being unhappy. If they could learn to bring their attention into the present moment, people reported being happier, even if they were doing something that they don't like. So let's say you don't like to wash the dishes. If you're washing the dishes and you're thinking about, I had so much fun at that party last week, you're probably happy. If you're washing the dishes and you're thinking about all the stress you have at school or at home or at work or something neutral, you're probably unhappy. But if you come into the present moment and you notice that, you notice your feet on the ground, you take a breath, you feel your hands as you wash the dishes, you feel the warmth of the water, you notice the scents, the smell. This provides happiness. So the assumption is that the more we can keep our attention in the present moment, the happier we are. Okay, so let's look at another area. This is an area that's really relevant to teens. This is the area of attention. Actually, it's relevant to everybody. A study we did at UCLA a while back was with 40 adults and adolescents who learned mindfulness over the course of 8 weeks. Now, what most of them were struggling with was attention deficit disorder or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, everyone who was in this study. And so they learned how to pay attention. What's very notable about mindfulness practice is it teaches us how to pay attention. If you're a teen, you are probably told all the time, pay attention, pay attention, pay attention. If you're an adult, you probably tell your kids, pay attention. And you yourself were told, pay attention, pay attention, pay attention. But nobody teaches you how to pay attention. Mindfulness is the skill of paying attention. That's one of the most important things about it. We learn to focus on something. When our attention wanders away, we bring it right back. So in this study, once the students studied mindfulness for 8 weeks and practiced it, the scientists looked at the data and they saw something which very interesting, which is that their conflict attention improved. Okay, so what's conflict attention? Conflict attention is, there's many types of three main types of attention. One type is conflict attention. So if I were to ask you to pay attention to my hand, just look at it, and now I were to distract you, things would conflict your attention, right? It's hard to do. It's really hard to do. But with mindfulness, people were able to stay more focused. This is very relevant for when you're at school and you're trying to pay attention to the teacher and everything is competing for your attention, right? Other kids are talking, there's birds outside the window, there's things going on. Mindfulness can help you pay better attention. Okay, a couple more areas to look at the research here. This is what people were looking at, brains of meditators, long-term meditators. So these are meditators who've been, say, living in the Himalayas, meditating in caves for years, right? They looked at their brain and they compared their brain to people of the same age range. So I don't know if you know this is probably less relevant if you're a teen, but for an adult, do you know that as you age, your brain thins out? So if you want something else to worry about, you can worry about that, your brain thinning out. Well, in the long-term meditators, we didn't see the same thing. Okay, so let's look at what happened, right? There are two areas, the insular cortex here and the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex, the red are the control group. So this is brain thickness. And this is age. So it's pretty thick when you're 25, but as you get down to 50, it's much less thick. But in the meditators in blue, their brains stayed pretty even, pretty robust, lots of gray matter. And it happened in this other area too. So why is this important? It's really important because the prefrontal cortex is responsible for executive functioning. We often think of the prefrontal cortex, one thing to think about it is the CEO of our brain. It's responsible for delayed gratification, for working memory, flexible thinking, impulse control, emotional regulation, right? So all of these things that we really want at no matter what age we are. People who practice meditation over a long term seem to have more gray matter in this part of the brain. So you hear this, and I'm guessing you're thinking, so what? I've never meditated before. These are long-term meditators. Well, they have done studies looking at people meditating, just new meditators who practice for 8 weeks, as it says here, on average of 27 minutes a day. And they saw changes in the thickness in their brain. I mean, there were small changes, but similar changes related to learning and memory and so forth, attention, things that similar to the other study. There's something that's very interesting that many of you may be familiar with, but it's the concept of neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is the idea that our brains can change depending on what we do with them. So for many, many years, scientists, until probably like 20, 25 years ago, scientists thought our brains stopped developing at 25. So that was it. Your brains would grow, develop, and then 25, you were done. That is not the case at all. Of course, now the scientists know that our brains continue to develop new neural pathways are developed, and we prune pathways that are not used. So a very good example of this is when they look at the brains of violinists. They study the brains of violinists, and they see that violinists have more gray matter, it's plumper, in areas connected to finger movement. And then one of the most famous studies looking at this was with taxi drivers in London, who it's a very complicated city to drive around. And when they looked at their brains, they saw that their brains were thicker in the area connected to memory formation compared to people of the same age. So it's just to say that what you practice, you can develop. If you think you're a person who's not good at concentrating, you can develop it. If you think you're a person who can't meditate, you can learn to do this because our brains can change. Last study I'll mention is a study that looked at kindness. Can mindfulness lead to more kindness? So this was the big question. With this study, this was done with a video game. So people played a video game that was about donating money. They were given like a certain amount of fake money, and they were donating it. But one group listened to a meditation, and then the other group just played the game. And what they saw was the people who meditated were 2.5, almost a little more than that, 2.5 times more generous than the control group. Now, is that scientific proof? No, of course not. There's many studies to continue around this, but it's still an interesting to think about the connections between when we do these practices, how does it make us live in the world? And what's also interesting is the kinder we are, people report more gratitude, more happiness, and then it is a very positive impact on mental health. Okay, some of these we won't go over, but these are studies that we've done at UCLA. We've done some studies with school children. We've done studies looking at sleep, lots of studies with breast cancer survivors, some cross-cultural studies, and you can see some of the ones we've done at UCLA. All right, so that's some of the science that I hope is helpful for you. And now I want to talk about mindfulness again, like what it is. So mindfulness is paying attention to present moment experiences with openness, curiosity, and a willingness to be with that experience. Let's look at that more closely. Mindfulness keeps our minds from being lost in the past or the future. So if you were to check into your mind at any point in the day, you would probably notice that you're thinking about something that happened, replaying it. Why did I do that? Why did I say it? Feeling bad about things. Or your mind is going into the future, planning, obsessing, worrying, going into the worst case scenario, catastrophizing. Our minds tend to go back and forth and back and forth. And sometimes we're in the present moment, but we're often in the present moment wishing it were a different present moment. So mindfulness is this invitation right here, right now, into this place of being here. I don't know if this looks familiar to any of you, maybe more so to the parents than the teens, but a lot of us wake up in the middle of the night thinking, did I lock the doors? Oh no, what's wrong? Something's happening, right? So I always tell people, don't believe everything you think in the middle of the night. It's really not helpful. It's always distorted. Whatever you think in the middle of the night, usually in the light of day, you think, what was I thinking? Another aspect of mindfulness is it counteracts automaticity. Automaticity is just going through life, busy, 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 and it's the end of the day and you didn't even notice the day was over. You didn't even notice anything that happened throughout the day. Do you ever get in a car and get out of the car and have no idea what happened in between? So this is very common. It's like many of us live our life on a kind of autopilot. We just go, we go through the days. Now, for some of us, it's because we're very busy and we have a lot of responsibilities and life is, intense and hard. And, but mindfulness can help us to live life more fully, to not live on autopilot, to live a kind of life where we feel more connected and present and grateful, connected to each other, connected to ourselves. There's a very strong connection between mindfulness and gratitude. And mindfulness also is helpful because it just helps us show up for life. Years ago, I had a meditation class that I taught. There was a physician in the class, and he was a doctor who was in the class. At the end of the 6 weeks, he said, I have lived on my street for 15 years, and until I took this class, I never knew there were mountains at the end of the street. Now, this is a very extreme example, but so many of us are like that. And with mindfulness, we start to have more appreciation of life. I'll also argue that mindfulness is something we already know and experience. It is not something far away that's not accessible to us. It's not something woo-woo or strange or, something that it's something that's part of every human being. So I don't know if you've had the experience of being out in nature and just feeling really peaceful and connected and at home. Or if you're in the middle of athletic activity and you're doing some sport or athletic activity and you just feel like you're in the zone and everything's flowing. Or in the midst of creative activity where you're doing art or music or writing and there's some sense of being really at home with yourself. This is a part of every human being. When you think about children, children are so in the present moment. When my daughter was young and I would be, walking down the street and she'd want to stop and look at every single bug on the sidewalk, and we'd have to stop along the way because she was so in the present moment. Well, I have news for you. We all were like that, every one of us. But what happened? Oh, everything happened. We went through our lives. We grew up. We took on responsibility. We had challenges, but we lost touch with this part of ourselves. So mindfulness in some way is a return to this part of ourselves that's part of every human being, this capacity for all of us to live with more ease and joy and well-being. Okay, so that's the start of what we're talking about here. And at the moment, we're going to give it a try. Okay, so, oops, stop. Oh, sorry, I didn't stop the share, did I? Did I stop it? Yeah, I stopped it. Okay, oops. All right, so let's now give mindfulness a try. And I want to start by having everybody just, I know some of you, maybe you've done it, some of you may have some experience, some of you it's entirely new. So let's see what happens. In order to do it, you can settle back in a way that's comfortable. Some of you are seated maybe on a chair, on a cushion, maybe you're on the couch, maybe you're on the bed. Wherever you are, anywhere you are is fine to practice mindfulness. So let's begin by by just noticing your body. If your feet are on the floor, that can be helpful. It doesn't have to be, but it can be helpful. Your hands are resting wherever they're comfortable. Your back can be upright, but please take care of your body any way you need to. And your eyes can be closed. A lot of people do meditate with their eyes closed, but you definitely don't have to. If you want to keep them open, you can. Just have them looking downward so you're not too distracted. So let's begin by taking a few deeper, longer, slower breaths. And as you do this, invite you to bring in some relaxation if that is possible. It may not be possible, but if it is, just the possibility of relaxation, invite that into yourself. You can feel your feet on the ground. Notice there's touch, there's heaviness, hardness, pressure. Notice your legs on the chair. You might feel sensations of your thighs pressing into the chair. How about the back, your back? Can you feel your back against the chair or couch? Notice your stomach area. Is your stomach tense or tight? See if you can allow it to soften. We often have a lot of tension in our stomach area, so see if you can allow it to soften. You can breathe more deeply into your stomach. Notice your hands. Let your hands be soft. Notice your arms and shoulders. Let your shoulders relax. And notice your face and facial muscles. Let your face be soft. So we're going to try a basic mindfulness practice, which we've actually already started, which is kind of where I like to begin people when they're starting out. Let's begin by noticing the sounds around us. So turn your attention to the sounds around you. There's sounds in the room. There might be sounds outside the room, sound of my voice. See if you can listen to the sound as if you're listening to your favorite music. Listen with curiosity and interest, openness. Notice that the sounds are coming and going. There might be one sound that grabs your attention. There might be more ambient sounds. Just listen. Often when we hear sound, our tendency is to think about the sound. I like it, I don't like it, I wonder what it is. See if you can simply listen without getting caught in a story about the sounds. Now notice, how was that for me? Did I like that? Just keep a note of it. Or maybe you did, maybe you didn't. Maybe you found it to be distracting. Just notice if it was helpful for you. Now turn your attention back into your body and see if you can notice your body is breathing. Without you doing anything, your body is breathing. And you notice your abdomen rising and falling, expanding and contracting with each breath. Let your breath be natural at its own natural rhythm, in and out through your nose. And now notice your chest area. Maybe you feel your chest rising and falling, expanding and contracting with each breath. Or perhaps you notice the air moving through your nose. There's tingling, warmth, coolness. It's helpful in mindfulness practice to have something to focus on. So you can choose either your breathing in your abdomen, your chest, or your nose. Or if you liked listening to sounds, like we did in the beginning, you can do that. Choose whichever is the clearest or the easiest or the one you liked the best. If you can't decide, just pick one because they all work equally well. And now we're going to practice noticing moment after moment, breath after breath, or sound after sound. One breath ends, the next breath begins. As you do this, you might notice that your attention starts to wander. So maybe you're with a breath or two or a sound or two, and then you start to think about other things, planning, remembering, imagining, whatever it is. When this happens, you're not doing anything wrong. If this happens, it's completely normal. When you notice your attention has wandered away, you can say a soft word in your mind, like thinking or planning, or you can just say thinking is easiest. Keep it simple. And then when you notice that, you can bring your attention right back to your main focus. So you might be with a breath or two, you get lost in thought, you notice it, thinking. And then you gently redirect your attention right back to your focus. And you do this over and over through the course of the meditation. Other things might happen. You might notice other things like sounds or body sensations or emotions, but let them be in the background. If it becomes really obvious, notice it. But for the most part, let's see if we can focus on our breath or the listening. So I'm going to stop talking for like not even 2 minutes, and you're going to give this a try on your own. As we bring the meditation to a close, notice the impact it had on you. Notice if you're feeling more peaceful or relaxed. You may or may not be. If you are, really enjoy how you're feeling. Enjoy the ease, the rest. If you're feeling something else, notice what else is here. See if you can let whatever is here be here. And now notice your feet on the ground. Take one more breath with awareness. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes or end the meditation. Okay, just take a moment to come back and notice how you're doing. So I'm going to ask you a question, and then after I ask you the question, then we'll go into more an open space for any questions at all for me. But my question to you is, what was that like? What happened as you did that meditation, and did any questions come up when you did the meditation that you have? So first, we're just going to stick to the meditation, and then we'll open it up more generally for any questions about mindfulness in the field. So I'd love to hear from you if anyone wants to just put into the Q&A what that experience was like for you. One person said, I like it. Okay, great. So if it's something you like, I encourage you to keep going with it. I'm going to give you some resources before we end to show you how you can keep going with it. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Someone said, I felt relaxed and peaceful, calmer. I felt like I want to fall asleep, relaxed and fell asleep. Relaxing and takes your mind off from thoughts. Nice. Great. Is there a best time of day to practice, meditate, or is it personal? Okay, I'm going to come back to that in a minute. What's the difference between meditation and okay, great question. So let me just see if there's any more people sharing their experience, and then I want to respond to a few things, and then I'll answer more general questions. So I saw that people were asking, is there someone mentioned they fell asleep. If you fell asleep, you're completely normal. A lot of people fall asleep when they meditate, probably because my guess is you don't get enough sleep. Most people don't get enough sleep. That's how I know. And so when you do this practice, it can be very calming and soothing, and it's not a big deal. You can learn to practice at a time of day if you're going to do it that you're least likely to fall asleep. So that goes to, so I'm just saying there's a number of people. So people were asking, is it normal to fall asleep? The two main things that happen, and I see this already looking at the questions, is that we either fall asleep, or not even fall asleep, we just get sleepy, or our mind gets restless. If you get restless doing this, there's nothing wrong with that. Hold on one second. So sorry. Sorry about that. So if you do get restless, that's also quite normal. Our minds, the fact that our minds are wandering, thinking about all sorts of things, this is a sign of human intelligence. We need to have that capacity to search for threats and to be thinking ahead and planning and so forth. So it's no wonder that when we sit to meditate, our minds can race all over the place. But what happens over time is we learn to calm it down, and over practice, it gets easier and easier. So let's talk about that. Someone was asking the question, how do you do this at home? What my recommendation is that you do it, you start where it's easy with 5 minutes a day. Everybody has time for 5 minutes, right? And there doesn't have to be a particular time of day to do it. You can do it, any time that's going to work for you. So if you're a morning person, you might want to do it when you get up. But if you're not a morning person, it may not be the best time to do it. So mindfulness is something that you have to, it's a practice. You can't just hear about it and do it. You have to really do it consistently. And that's where you'll see the changes, like the scientific benefits that I was talking about. So all of that being said, I want to just open to more general questions, which I see there's a lot up on the on the here. So why don't I wasn't clear with whether are you going to present them to me, or shall I just pick them from the Q&A?
Yes, let me ask a couple questions here. And how to help my kid with mental illness to get interested in meditation?
Well, it's not an easy thing to do, right? I always tell parents that the most important thing they can do is do it themselves and model it. And then the kids will see you doing that, because how hard it is to get them to do anything, right? The one thing I will say is, if your child is getting treatment of some sort, as I mentioned earlier, mindfulness is incorporated into a lot of contemporary treatments that are being used. And so they may have some information, some access to it in that way.
Okay. And do different forms of meditation or mindfulness have different effects?
Yeah, so there's a lot of types of meditation. We can think of meditation as a really big category. Like sports is a big category. There's hundreds of types of sports. There's hundreds of types of meditation. Mindfulness is one of them. It has the effect that I was talking about. It builds attention, it calms, it concentrates our mind, it develops awareness and self-awareness, and cultivates all those good qualities I mentioned. Other meditations will have different results. So for instance, you might do a meditation that is just focusing on one thing. Maybe some of you have ever done transcendental meditation, where you just repeat a word over and over. It has different results. Or prayer is a form of meditation, also has different results. So it depends on, it's not like one is better than the other. It depends on your goal.
Okay. If you make it a regular practice, is there a best time of day?
Well, as I was saying earlier, it's the time of day that's going to work for you. There's no best time. It's the time of day that's going to work for you. Yeah.
Okay. Can you recommend an online guided meditation program?
I definitely can. Before I end, I'm going to give you some resources. But one thing I will say is UCLA has an app. It's called UCLA Mindful. I'll show it to you before I go. And it has, this is more just meditations that you can practice with, because it's hard to do it by yourself. But when you have someone like myself guiding you, it's easier to do it. So we have on our meditation app, it's called UCLA Mindful. We have 17 different languages, including we have Mandarin, Cantonese. So there's a couple there, but there's only like 5 or 6 meditations, but enough to get you started. And then you can look at what we offer at UCLA, because we have a lot to get going on learning mindfulness and meditation.
Okay, great. Does mindfulness have epigenetic effects?
Well, they're looking at that now. That was one of the, like that early study that I was showing in one of the first slides I showed you about the impact on inflammation. They're just looking, geneticists are just starting to look at mindfulness. So it's still kind of early to know, but there's some hypothesis that it can impact like generationally.
Yeah. Okay. In a school setting, how can mindfulness be presented to parents that would encourage them to accept the practice for their children if they are not convinced of the efficacy of mindfulness?
So this is a hard question, because are you asking, maybe it's sort of like, are you saying if it was brought to your school and other parents weren't interested in it?
I believe that this audience is saying that he or she is from a school teacher.
Yeah, there's a lot of research looking at its impact on school children. So that would be one place to start, is to say, like, I can show, there's something you can take a look. The best compilation of research is an organization called mindfulschools.org. They have a lot of research with kids. So that's really, I think, one of the best ways to introduce it. It's being taught in school systems. It's been like, there's a whole like entire districts that are teaching mindfulness. Some parents react because they're worried, oh, is this religious? And I don't want, there's a lot of different, but I think the best teachers can teach it in a way that brings a lot of confidence to the kids and to the parents.
Okay. I think several audience asked a question. I think this is for our foundation. Are we going to have a video recording of the webinar? Yes, we do. It has been recorded and we'll put it up to our website and also upload it into YouTube, but we will publish when we've done that. Okay, so next question. How to motivate teenagers to start and maintain a daily mindfulness practice? What can parents do if they don't accept parent suggestions? I think many parents ask a similar question. So what if teenagers resist the idea of mindfulness?
Well, you know what? I mean, it's hard to get teens to do anything, right?
Right.
I mean, it's not, there's nothing like magical about mindfulness. Oh, they'll do it because they know it's good for them. There's many things they should do, like, exercise or stop eating so much sugar or whatever it is, that it's hard to get them to do anything. So as I said earlier, modeling it yourself is really happy. There's also some organizations that teach mindfulness specifically to teens. One of my favorite is called IBME, Inward Bound Mindfulness Education.com. Where you can go learn it with other teenagers. And in that way, there's a supportive network for learning instead of, your parents saying you should do that. That's the problem. That leads to resistance. So it's not an easy solution because it's like anything else. There's some books that also just for teens about meditation if they're interested in that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. In brain activity, how does meditation have its effects?
Well, like as I was suggesting in one of the slides, there's an emphasis on it can. Well, okay, there's a couple of things. There's brain activity and there's structure and there's function. So there's I'm not an expert on the functional, but there's ways that the theta waves get developed, so that calms the brain, and it also can lead to more synchrony. So left hemisphere and right hemisphere can get more aligned. These are two of the main ways that I'm aware of.
Okay, and what is the difference between meditation and the deep breathing?
Deep breathing is very effective, but remember I said there's many types of meditation, right? And so one of them is mindfulness, but there's breath meditation that's just focusing on the breath. So they're just different types of practices. Mindfulness emphasizes awareness. So it's not, we notice our breathing, but we notice our breathing in the service of becoming more aware, right? More aware about ourselves, what's happening, learning to regulate our emotions, find more emotional balance. Notice that I'm anxious or I'm sad. We can be mindful. That's very different than just being with our breathing. Being with our breathing can calm us down, but awareness can actually help relieve the emotion.
Okay, here's an interesting question. Could there be a situation where mindfulness is more harmful than helpful?
It's more likely that it just doesn't do anything, for someone that they don't, not everybody likes mindfulness. It's just like there's no medication that is good for everybody. There's no meditation that's good for everyone. But the only places where I've heard that's been challenging is working with people with like severe PTSD, doing mindfulness, and then it can trigger old memories. And so it has to be a very skillful teacher and context to do it in that context.
I see. Okay. Are there active and moving types of a meditation for youngsters who have difficulty being still?
Yes. So mindfulness is taught seated as we did, but it's also can be taught moving and walking. It's very sort of traditional to teach it as a walking meditation. And instead of noticing your breathing, you're mostly noticing your feet as you're hitting the ground and taking steps. So it's a great way to do it. And definitely when it's taught to teenagers, they use a lot of movement, not just staying still.
Okay. And what is the difference between mindfulness and the meditation?
Mindfulness is a type of meditation. It's also a quality of attention that we can have at any moment. So mindfulness, we just cultivated when we did the meditation, but also we can cultivate like being mindful at any moment. You can be mindful when you're driving. You can be mindful when you're eating. You can be mindful when you're about to yell at your child. You can be mindful when you're feeling stressed out. So mindfulness we can feel throughout the day. It's not only a meditation.
Okay. I've seen a lot of comments about feeling sleepy when practicing. And
I think I
here's a
answered that earlier. Yeah.
yeah. And there's a question is, does mindfulness help with sleep issue? If so, how does it help?
Yeah, so you can do mindfulness specifically for sleep. And on the app that I'm going to show you in a moment, we have a meditation designed for sleep. And we've done some research studies showing that it does help you sleep. So you can use it in different ways. You can use it to wake up and be more aware and alert, and you can use it to help with sleep.
Mm-hmm. How does mindfulness help us care for ourselves and love ourselves better?
I love that question. Thank you, whoever asked that. When we practice mindfulness, we're cultivating a non-judgmental, kind awareness, and that awareness translates out into our lives. It translates out. So we learn that when we don't have to say, pay attention to the breathing, there's something wrong with you. Instead, it's like, oh, okay, I'm wandering, just come back, come back. So we cultivate these kind states of heart and mind. And it's incredibly important that we bring kindness and self-compassion. There's also complementary practices in the mindfulness field that teach us to be kinder to ourselves. So that's another way it works. I'm thinking maybe, I know there's so many questions, but I'm thinking I'd love to just show a few last slides so people can see the resources. Is that okay?
Yes, that's great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me just share the screen again and start it up again. Okay. So I'm just going to go back because someone asked about what the definition was. So let me just go. This was the definition. They wanted to see it. I can also send a kind of a handout with some of this information on it so that we can just, it just can go out to all the people and you can have how to follow up with this. So that's the definition: paying attention to present moment experiences with openness, curiosity, and a willingness to be with that experience. Okay, so now I'm going to just share some of the resources. I'm just going to zip through this, sorry. Okay, so our center at UCLA, the Mindful Awareness Research Center, brings mindfulness to the Los Angeles community, UCLA, and worldwide. Our goal is to create a more compassionate society and create more well-being. We have education, research, public programs. So I teach every Thursday, or not just me, but someone from our center teaches. We have Monday and Thursday online programs if you'd like to join for just a half an hour to meditate with a group of people. If you happen to be in the Los Angeles area, we have some at the Hammer Museum, but otherwise it's all online and you can go to our website to see that. We have an app, UCLA Mindful. This is what it looks like. And it has some basic meditations in there. There's some sleep meditations. And it has a new meditation here with the every week. And we have a Spanish section. And then we, as I said, we have 17 different languages, including Mandarin Cantonese. This is the book I co-wrote with Susan Smalley. It's a book on science and mindfulness. My more recent book. And this is the information, but I think what I'll do is I'll send a handout out. I also have another book I wrote for teenagers. It was more of a Buddhist focus, but it's called Wide Awake, a Buddhist Guide for Teens. Okay. So I think I've reached the end. I don't know if, what shall we do? Shall we?
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you, Diana, for sharing your knowledge and very, very helpful information for us today. We're about time. And also thank you for all the Q&A. We're already at the 7 now. So I think we are going to close this webinar. Okay. And thanks to everyone for joining our webinar. And we hope to see you again in the next webinar. And please help to take a short survey. And when you log it off, and I will leave the donation QR code for a few more minutes. And thank you for donating to support our programs. And thank you, Diana. With that, I'm closing the webinar. And thanks, everyone. And
My
goodbye.
pleasure. Great to be here.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye. Take care. Stay healthy.